Okay, welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Wednesday, May 13th for my first and fifth, excuse me, hours, and Thursday, May 14th for my fourth hour. We are starting the Cold War today, the last unit, the last deal we're going to talk about in U.S. History 3. So your work for today is your best year's video worksheet, vocab quiz, and then this little mini lecture that you're watching right now. So let's take a look at the remaining schedule, and I don't think I'm still in disbelief that this is what we got going on here. So here's our schedule right here, okay? So today is the 13th, okay? So here's, if you're my first or fifth hours, we're right here. Sorry, fourth hours, you'll have to figure this out, but we got 1, 2, 3 class periods left in which I can deliver new content to you. And that's crazy. That's it. Okay. And this is going to be like a Flipgrid assessment type thing here. So I've basically got 2 days to teach you about the Cold War. Wowee. So that's where we're at here, kids. Okay. All of this stuff that's left here is going to be, checking in and getting in some of that missing work. So, I even cut out, okay, this was everything that we were supposed to cover in U.S. History B. Here's what we ended up covering. I ended up cutting the Industrial Revolution and Progressive Era out of due to time. Don't tell the curriculum police, but that's where we're at. Let's review the political spectrum real quick here, okay? So in World War II, okay, it was you had communists, okay, and you had the fascists. Okay, and the United States was kind of in the middle here somewhere. I would say a little more toward capitalism at that point. But just to review this stuff here, okay? You've got radical, liberal, moderate, conservative, and reactionary. Okay, and remember, we always talked about the political spectrum in terms of change. Okay, and I understand a lot of you look at this and go, politics is more complex than that. It absolutely is. What I'm showing you here is a linear spectrum, and politics can get a heck of a lot more complicated than just this linear approach. But for our intent and purposes today, this will work just fine. Okay, so the communists, the Soviet Union, okay, were a part of World War II. The fascists, the Nazis, okay, they were a part of World War II. Okay, that bitter war between the Nazis and the Soviets was a nasty one. Okay, if you were to look up in a Soviet textbook the World War II and all the bloody battles between those two countries, oh my gosh, it was absolutely terrible. And when you look at the political spectrum, it kind of shows you, on this side of the political spectrum, it's the thought that everybody's equal. Okay, everything is publicly owned on this side of the political spectrum. Whereas with fascism, it's the idea that everybody is unequal. Okay, that everybody is unequal. Well, I'm skipping over a lot of things here, so I know that this might be confusing for some of you here. But at the end of World War II, fascism, by and large, is dead. Okay, so the only two remaining powers that are going to exist are the United States, okay, which was one of the only countries that wasn't war torn. The United States is going to come out of World War II, with that economy really, really doing well due to that industrialization. Communism is still going to be in the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union is going to be a superpower. But they're going to be trying to make as many alliances in the Eastern Hemisphere as possible because they wanted to spread the idea of communism. So, like we've mentioned many times, here's where American politics tends to float between socialism and capitalism. Okay, the idea of most things being publicly owned versus most things being privately owned. Okay, big government versus small government. This is where American politics has always been, floating always between these two concepts. Okay. So, and just one last thing that I want to mention here is, socialism is just for the most part, it's just the idea that most things are publicly owned with a big government, and it's going to take some big spending to do it. Okay, socialism is not communism. Okay, communism is a radical form in which all things are publicly owned. Okay, and everybody is equal, and there are no private possessions. Okay, Capitalism is the idea that most things are privately owned. There's a small government, okay, and people that are capitalists tend to be conservative and don't want to spend too much money, okay? They don't want to be taxed, okay? Does that mean that capitalism and fascism, although they're on the same side of the political spectrum, are the same thing? No, okay? This is an extreme form, okay, of this side of the political spectrum, just like this is an extreme form of this side of the political spectrum. So it seems nowadays that people are so quick to call, anybody that's socialist a communist. You can kind of see where that slippery slope comes from, okay? Just a couple things out of the Cold War that I want to talk about real quick here, okay? Again, this is not my PowerPoint because it's a good one. This is, think of what a scary time it was in 1945, okay? Dropping the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and people are going to realize how terrible people can be to each other, and how the possibility of a push-button war and exploding cities in a matter of seconds is a realization. And also in 1945, the Allies are stumbling across concentration camps and going, "Oh my God, look at how terrible people are to each other." Okay, kind of a scary deal. Well, the first part of the Cold War that we're going to talk about is this ideological struggle that was that political spectrum that we just talked about. Okay, you're going to see two hardened groups form, okay, and the only powers that were left. Remember, fascists are gone, and that's the only real explanation I can give you as to why the Cold War is going to start. Why capitalism versus communism? Because those are two competing ideologies. Okay, those were across the political spectrum from each other. So on one side you see communism wanting to be spread worldwide, and on the other side you see containment, wanting to try to keep it where it was. So you're going to enter from the 1940s all the way until the late 1980s. You're going to see this being the age of espionage between the KGB and the CIA. Okay, there's never any real clear communication between the Soviet Union and the United States, and a lot of this stuff is going to be kind of under the table and subversive and very, kind of a shady time. Okay, right at the end of World War II, already you are going to see what Winston Churchill is going to call an Iron Curtain descending. That's going to divide Europe, both first figuratively, but then literally in an actual wall, in the Berlin Wall that's going to come up in 1961. Okay, one of the better things that the United States had done at the end of World War II was called the Marshall Plan. This was going to try to provide economic aid and recovery to anybody that is going to seek it out. Okay, $12.5 billion dollars of U.S. aid was sent to Western Europe, extended to Eastern Europe and the USSR, but take a guess, they are going to reject that, because if they would have taken that, it basically would have been saying your economic system is better than that of communism, okay? Real big problem with post-war Germany and how they divvied it up here was that they're going to separate it into these four zones, okay? And obviously these three Western zones are pretty much the same and are going to become Western West Germany, okay, but the Soviet zone, or the eastern side, okay, is going to be divvied up as well, and they're also going to divvy up Berlin. And the real problem there is that Berlin is in the Soviet zone. So when they block off the borders here and don't allow the United States in, or the Westerners in to their parts of Berlin, now we've got a problem. In a real twist of irony, in 1948 and 1949, as the United States was trying to help people that were starving in Germany, the Soviets were trying to starve them out. Okay, they were pulling supplies out and trying to punish Germany for what had happened. And ironically, the United States is going to use this very same bombers that they used to bomb Germany in World War II to deliver supplies, food, fuel, supplies for all kinds of stuff for families that they needed. Okay, you're also going to hear about an arms race in this time. Okay, the Soviet Union is going to get their hands on the first atom bomb in 1949, and that was going to be a scary deal. Okay, I'm sure you've seen fallout shelter signs in some of our older buildings here in town. And I wish we could spend some more time talking about that, about that arms race and about atomic warfare on both sides, okay? A couple of vocab words you're going to need to know is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, otherwise known as NATO. That was an alliance of all these capitalist democracies that are going to be together. And also the Warsaw Pact in 1955, which is going to be all of those communist states that are together. One big one that is going to be missing here is China. Although China is going to be obviously communist, they are not going to be a part of the Warsaw Pact because they have been a closed-door nation and were for a long, long time. Okay, here's Mao's revolution in 1949. The Korean War. This is just one of the many proxy wars. Okay, remember, it's never mano a mano, United States versus Soviet Union, but the United States is going to take place in a lot of these proxy wars, okay, where they were fighting the Chinese in Korea, okay, where they were fighting, you know, the Viet Cong in Vietnam. They're all examples of proxy wars, okay? Sputnik, the Soviet Union wins the space race early by getting its first satellite into space. This caused a lot of worry in people. They didn't know what they were putting up there, but all it was a satellite. It's just something that rotates about the Earth. But anyway, that's all I wanted to, well, actually, I want to tell this story quick, okay? If you haven't seen the movie about Francis Gary Powers, here is a pretty interesting story, okay? U-2 spy plane. So here's Francis Gary Powers, and if you haven't heard of U-2 spy planes before, it's pretty amazing for the time. They thought that these planes could fly so high that it was above radar or missile defense. So here's Francis Gary Powers, and he's in the spy plane, and it's taking pictures of the Soviet Union, and he's told that, look, if you get shot down, we're going to deny that we even know who you are. Okay, so he's obviously an American, but he, go figure, gets shot down, and what he's told to do is when getting shot down is he was supposed to stab himself with a needle that was supposed to kill himself so that he couldn't be captured by the enemy. Well, I can imagine that being shot down would be pretty disorienting. Well, for whatever reason, that doesn't happen. He's captured and negotiated. You know, first the Soviet Union goes, haha, we got you. And the United States first, you know, disavows all knowledge of what had happened, but eventually they did negotiate and get him back. Interestingly enough, Francis Gary Powers died in a crop dusting accident years later in California. So this is some later Cold War stuff. We're not going to go get quite into that quite yet. And I do want to talk about some of this later stuff. I think that will be early next week, okay? So that's all I've got for today. Make it a great day or don't. The choice